Hello, this is a guy who likes fanfiction and is too lazy to read, so here is Liege in audio form. Check the description for the links to the author. Chapter 61, Memories of Animosity. Meanwhile, he adjusted the deer he caught on his shoulder and adjusted the rope on his waist where 2 rabbits is hanging before he continue his trek back to his home, dreading the moment he will pass through the gates and will be met by either hateful words or glares as he passed by the streets. He don't know what he did to be subjected to their hate, and he is doing his best to help the village by hunting food as best as he can, but all of his haul are either thrown back to him before he was spat at or being robbed of them all after he was beaten. The kindly healer told him to stop helping them and just think of himself. He will only get hurt, but he can't, not when there is a lot of children that is being affected by this famine. But that too was once again rejected with a spit on his face when he offered food. "Hey, madam," he said as the healer tended the wound on his arm. A villager attacked him with a sword this time. "Yes, dearie," the healer asked as she finished dressing his wounds. "What is a child of misfortune?" he asked. He doesn't know the whole meaning of it, but he knows that it is an insult to someone. The healer stopped attending to his wounds and looked at him with an unreadable look in her ancient eyes. "Who told you that?" she asked. "The butcher," he said, looking away, feeling as though he just did something wrong again and the old healer will hate him and leave him alone. "I was just trying to give him food since his children haven't eaten in weeks, and I thought maybe I should help as best as I could," he said. "Did I do something bad?" he asked. The healer shakes her head. "No, dearie," she said. "No," she said as she looked at the floor, hiding her face from his view. He tried to stop himself from crying as he remembered the cold treatment he have been receiving from the villagers these past few months. He don't know what he did, and he don't know how to apologize since no one is willing to tell him anything. "Then, what? Why is everyone being so mean to me all of a sudden?" he asked as he felt tears streaming down his face. "What did I do?" he asked as he furiously wiped the tears away, embarrassed that he have cried in front of the woman he have come to love as a grandmother. The old woman stood up and hugged him close to her heart. "Nothing," she said softly as she rubbed his head in an attempt to comfort him. To experience such a heartbreaking plight for someone so young, only someone with a heart of stone would put this kind of hardship towards such a sweet and gentle soul, and those villagers are worse than any scum and scoundrels. "You did nothing wrong," the old woman said. "Maybe I did killed Mom," he sobbed. "If only I noticed, then maybe I could have prevented her from dying," he said. "I want to see my mom, I want to hear her voice, I want to apologize for not doing enough to heal her," he muttered. "Hush," the healer said, knowing that she must have already heard the whispers of how he killed the woman that raised him, the woman that he showered with nothing but love and honor until the very end of her days and beyond. "You did nothing wrong, you have nothing to apologize about, dearie," the healer said as she pulled him deeper in her arms. "All you did is love the woman that raised you to the very end," she stated. "All you wanted is to help everyone. There is nothing wrong with that," the healer said. "Then, why?" he asked as he wrapped his arms around her waist. "They are blaming you," the healer said, trying to say the reason why the villagers hated him as easy as possible. "For what?" he asked. "I don't recall doing anything," he said. "It is exactly that," the healer said. "You are innocent and you just want to go along with the rest of your days in peace," she said. "And among the villagers here, you are the only one that wasn't affected by the famine because you know how to hunt and how to gather plants, fruits, and mushrooms," she said. "But isn't that only natural?" he said as he sniffled. "If they want, then I can teach them the things this man that visited the village last year," he suggested. "I'm afraid that it won't do any good now, dearie," the healer said. "They are too far gone in their resentment of you that they will refuse anything you will suggest to them," she said. "We better prepare for the worst, we better start packing, leave this village before their bullying of you escalates into something even more sinister," the healer muttered as the feeling of dread started to rise inside her chest. He sighed as he took a deep breath as the village's gate came to sight and prepared himself for either a hateful words or a hurtful blow to his body. When he managed to get inside the village's gates, he is surprised and quite suspicious when he wasn't greeted by hostility or hatred. The villagers is surprisingly calm. No signs of animosity or anything, it's just nothing. No lashing out at him, no throwing rocks at him, and even no glares, just blank looks was thrown his way and to him. Nothing is scarier than that since he can't read them as well as when they wear their hearts on their sleeves. He navigated through the town squares as cautiously as he can, keeping his senses alert. Who knows what they are up to now? He have to be careful. As the view of the humble cottage came into view, a sigh of relief managed to escape his mouth as he gradually get closer and closer to home. He paused for a moment and admired the place he called home. It's small and admittedly quite old with its bricked walls and a little chimney on top, nevertheless it is home and it holds a lot of fond memories inside them, such as the time his mother prepared him snack or just spend the day away knitting while he either watch her knit or nap beside her while feeling the warm summer breeze in his hair. Such memories of brighter days, but those days are over now and he is now living in the present where no warmth can be felt, only pain and coldness, but he will power through it and he will make it through it for his mother's sake. With that he nodded to himself before he opened the door to his home, and he is about to announce that he is home to an empty house when a poignant and sickening and familiar scent of metal invaded his senses and he instantly felt dizzy as the memory of the man he killed came to mind once more and he started to hyperventilate as he tried to calm himself down, but to no avail. The blood, the life leaving the man's eyes, the sensation of taking another's life. He started walking to the kitchen as he tried to keep his breathing under control, and what he saw in the kitchen finally made his food reappear again as he threw up on the floor, because right in front of him is the mangled remains of one of the cattle he is raising, pinned to the wall with its intestines hanging from its stomach, blood dripping to the wooden floor below. He tried to catch his breath and try to calm himself and tried to clear his head, but to no avail. He kept seeing the dead man in his lifeless eyes, kept smelling the sickening scent of blood. While he is beside himself, trying so hard to regain himself, he heard the floor behind him creak as he heard a footstep and then two and then three coming closer and closer to him. "Hello, Shay," the chief said as he heard the footsteps stopping behind him. "Do you like our surprise?" he asked in an unnervingly calm voice. He straightened his back in an attempt to look defiant. "These people, how dare they?" "Well," the chief asked, "do you?" he asked. "You, son of a dash," he said as he started to move towards the chief, ready to punch the man when two stronger men caught him to the punch, literally. "My, what a language you have there, whelp," the chief said with a condescending smile as he recoiled in pain at the hard punch on his stomach. "Did your mother taught you to speak such crude language?" he asked as he walks towards him while the two men tightened their hold on him and straightened him. "How about I tell you about manners?" the chief said as he punched him on the guts. "Or maybe I should beat some in you," he said as he threw a particular hard punch on his guts, making him spit blood. "You are quite rude to kill someone," the chief said as he punched his face. He gritted his teeth as he saw his other fist coming and hitting him again. After a few minutes of being beaten by this raving madman, the chief signaled the men to let him go, making his limp and weak body drop the hard floor with a thud. "How would you make amends with this mess, boy?" the chief asked as he circled around him, drawing a club from his belt. "Tell me," the chief said as he crouched in front of him. "How would I bring my wife back from Hades' abyss?" he asked. He spat at the man he once respected. "If I know, I would have already did it to bring Mom back," he said weakly, trying to see from his left eye. The beating he got seems to damage his vision in his left eye. He have to ask the healer to look at it for him, or he might lose his sight at worst or just be semi-blind in the other eye at best. "Too bad," the chief said before he signaled the men to pick him. "Speaking of which," he said as he looked around the house, "this is such a nice house," the chief said. "A little too nice for a bastard like you," he said as he motioned to the men to take him out of the house. As they dragged him outside of his home while the scent of oil invaded his nose. "What are they doing?" They couldn't be thinking of. "And as shall be done to the devil's works on earth, the goddess have ordered," the chief said as a man gave him a torch. "Cleanse all those that done the devil's work. Let there be light, and light there shall be," the chief said as he threw the torch to the oil, lighting it on fire. "You," he muttered weakly as he helplessly watched the fire crawl towards his home. You will pay for this, he muttered as his home was consumed by the crimson tongue of the devil, burning every good memories he have with it. It seems like you still have some spirit in you, boy, the chief hissed. Well, he said before he laughed. We can fix that, he said. Right, men? He asked the two men, who merely chuckled as a response before he leaned into an eye level to him. I will make you pay, the chief said, for every misfortune you have brought in this village, for betraying us after everything this village have done to you, the chief hissed. I will collect my due, he said. Count on that, Horson, the chief said before he stood straight and raised the club he is holding. Take a nap while you can, he said before he hit him on the head. Child of misfortune, the chief said. His vision is starting to blur as he felt the men dragging him further away from the burning house. And everything went dark. Chapter 62, Memories of Chaos. He groaned as he begun to gain consciousness. The throbbing in his head intensified as he started to regain his facilities. Dearie. A familiar voice called to him. Wadesh, he muttered as he started to open his eyes. The image before him is a muddled blend of colors as his vision is starting to clear, and he was greeted by the sight of the healer in front of him, brown eyes looking at him in concern. By the goddess, the kindly healer gasped in horror. What have they done to you? She asked. He tried to move and check on the older woman, but he found that his hands is bound behind him and around a wooden pole, pinning him in place, hopelessly at the mercy of their oppressors. What is going on? He muttered as he looked around and saw the blood-red sky, telling him that it was dusk and the villagers gathered at the town square. The old healer is about to say something when they both heard footsteps behind them, making him freeze as his body shut down in fear of another beating by the hands of the village's chief. Oh, Shay, the old healer muttered as her ancient heart broke once more, or at least shattered what remains of her heart, as she saw Shay, happy and sweet Shay, freeze in fear, vibrant purple eyes shrouded in fear as he started to breath heavily. Shay, she called out to the fearful boy. Dearie, look at me, she said urgently, catching the boy's swollen and fearful good eye. That's right, the healer said. Focus on me, she said. He said as he tried to calm down, but to no avail. He said, trying to form a coherent sentence. I'm here, the healer said. Focus on me, dearie, she said desperately as he saw the devil stopped behind Shay. How touching, the village's chief said in a deceptively calm and gentle tone. But how utterly despicable, the chief sneered. You of all people, Miss Celia, he said, are siding with this heretic, this blight in the goddess' sight, the chief announced, while the audience throw hateful and spiteful words towards the kind healer. Don't you dare drag her into this, he exclaimed as he struggled from his bonds. Such a spirit, the chief said mockingly. What do you say we extinguished that spirit? He asked as he faced the audience. You leave him alone, Cedric, Celia shouted. He is just a child, she said. He is indeed just a child, Cedric said with a nod. So, Celia said as hope rised in her ancient heart, hope that she somehow got through this tyrant of a man and convinced him to stop this cruel and downright oppressive treatment of an innocent child. But this child, Cedric said as he pointed to him, is the whole catalyst of all of our misfortunes. The famine, the coughing disease, all of it, he said before he took a deep breath, is because of this child, Cedric said, pointing to him before the crowd cheered in agreement. It's your fault, Celia shouted. I warned you about the oncoming famine and you didn't listen. I told you to save up coins in order to buy supplies from other territories, but you didn't listen. Instead you embellished those coins for your selfish greed. Celia said, Shay didn't kill your wife. You did, you cheating Horson, she shouted. You are the cause of why her sickness escalated. You killed her, Celia said. So, let go of the boy and face your sins, she said. Cedric looked thoughtful for a second, making the old healer tense as she waited for his response and if she managed to get through that vile man's skull. Cedric walks towards the old healer and leaned into her face, close enough that only him and her can hear one another. "Shut your mouth or I'll shut it for you, old huggy eye," Cedric growled lowly. "You demmed scoundrel," Celia hissed. "Here's what we are going to do, huggy eye," Cedric said. "You kill the little bastard and I will forget about this little transgression of yours," he said before he motioned for the men to hand him the sword. "Are you dash?" Celia said, but was cut off by the feeling of the rope behind her loosening. "What are you doing?" she asked. Cedric handed her the sword. "Now," he said, "kill that bastard and we will forget this," Cedric said with a smile. The old woman looked at the shivering boy and to the sword in her hand. "Madam," he muttered as the old healer walks towards him, sword in hand. The kindly old healer stopped in front of him while the village chiefs behind her. "I'm sorry, she muttered, "but I have to do what I have to," the old healer said as she readied her sword to strike at him. He looked at the woman he thought as his own grandmother and his blood runs cold at the realization as the kindly old healer gave one last gentle smile before she turned around and strike at the chief. The chief dodged the poorly timed attack of the old healer, but not without she managed to cut his ear off. The village chiefs shouted in pain and in rage before he punched the old woman, making the kind healer fall down in pain, making her let go of the sword in her hand. "Stop it!" he shouted as the chief grabbed the sword from the ground as he watched the chief stomp on the old woman. "I'm the one you want," he shouted as the village's chief raised the sword over his head, making him struggle against his bonds even harder in an attempt to free himself, but to no avail. His words fell on deaf ear and his struggle is futile. He cannot even loosen the ropes binding him. "Leave her alone," he shouted as he continued to struggle. The chief sneered, his face resembling those of a demon. "Purge those who have turned their backs to their fellow brethren, and so, the goddess ordered," he exclaimed, "execute my will and purge those heathens who have turned their backs on their fellow men," he said as he brought down the sword. Time slowed in his eyes as the old healer smiled gently at him as though to comfort him as her mouth moved before her head was severed from her body. He looked at the headless corpse on the floor as his ears kept ringing. The chief picked up the severed head from the floor and lifted it to an eye level to him. Blood swiftly drips down from the neck and brown eyes muddled lifelessly as it looked him in the eyes. "See," the chief said with a sneer, "this is what you brought," he said. "Nothing but death and misfortune," he said. "All those kindness they have shown to you was only met by death. Your mother that nourished you and loved you, and now, this old healer who have took you under her wings," the chief said. "You caused nothing but misfortune and you are an ungrateful bastard that only took and give nothing back," he said. "Who would ever love you after all this?" The chief said. "No one," he hissed, "and I do pity any person that will have the misfortune to be loved by you," the chief said, "since being the receiver of your affections is as good as a death sentence," he said. "Look at your mother," the chief said, "and look at her," he said, pointing to the headless corpse on the floor. "No one should suffer the fate of being loved by you, since your love is akin to suffocating them slowly, just as how your mother, or rather stepmother, slowly suffocated," the chief said. "Go away, child of misfortune. You are not welcome here," he shouted. The audience followed him by shouting the same thing. "Child of misfortune, right?" And everything went dark after that. "Now, die," the chief said as he swung his sword towards the helpless and quiet boy before he was interrupted by a burst of purple light. "What a useless thing, eh? Man with white hair and pale skin as they come upon the rotting corpse of their comrade. Left to the elements and evidence of animals eating away at the body is evidence, not to mention an arrow still lodged in his neck, but the man couldn't be bothered to mourn for his fallen comrade, not when they have finally managed to find traces of what they are looking for. To be killed this way," the man said with a sneer. "How pathetic," he said. "Thales," one of his comrades said. "What now?" the man Thales asked as he faced his comrade. "We have found traces of the commander," the soldier said. "Where does it lead us?" Thales asked before he was cut off by a sudden burst of familiar power, and a flash of purple appeared in a faraway village. A sudden laugh burst out from his mouth. "I finally found," Thales exclaimed. "Epimenes, he said. Your orders, Thales, the man asked. Call the others, Thales said. We are going to be having a good haul today, he said as they moved towards where that power is coming from. Thales smiled as soon as they saw the villagers running in panic as a deer rampages inside the village. To an onlooker, it just looked as though a deer have been ravaged by an unknown disease, but as soon as the deer started to morph into a humanoid creature that resembles a deer, shrouded in an ungodly purple light, and Thales instantly knew. They have finally found who they are looking for. A power resembling that of the metamorphic slaughterer, but somehow a bit different from Heracles' power. The monster tore through the crowd of panicking and running villagers, mercilessly and violently. Blood splattered about the pavement and towards the walls of the houses, and limbs and organs flew around in a conconity of red and danced around in the symphony of fears around them. The monster emerged from the massacre, black fur covered in blood and red eyes flashing in the dark before it let out a howl that sounded both angry and sorrowful. That's one of the mages said. What are you waiting for? Thales asked. Take as many test subjects you can find and create as much chaos as you can, he ordered as he cast a spell. The monster howled once more as the village was set aflame. He can hear screams and he can smell the pungent scent of metal and smoke as soon as he managed to come to his senses. As soon as he opened his eyes, he is standing in the middle of chaos. The villagers are running around in panic and the village is set ablaze. What happened? As he recalled, he was in the execution platform in the town's center when blacked out and the old healer. He have to go back and bury the older woman. She doesn't deserve to be left there and let these ungrateful villagers defile her any longer. Die. A villager said behind him. He turned just in time to see the blade coming down and just in time to see several dark spike-like energy stab through the man. The man coughed blood before he succumbed to his injuries and fell down on the ground, life's light leaving his eyes, and he is no more. Behind the man, he saw a man in a dark and ornamental armor with skin as pale as the first snow in the winter solstice, eyes matching his complexion and resembling that of dead fish's eyes. The man merely grinned as he walks towards him. We finally found you, the man said as he started to back away as slow as he can. Epimenides, the man said as he come closer and closer to him. His back hit a wall and he suddenly found himself unable to run away from this man. Nowhere to run, the man said with a smirk. Epimenides, he said. Who is this Epimenides? His name is Shay, not Epimenides, and what do these people want from him? Did they do this? Don't resist, boy, the man said as he made a move to grab at him, and we'll make this as painless as possible, he said. Come with me, the man said with a sneer. No, he muttered as his legs started to shake in fear. Something about this man is terrifying and he doesn't know what. The man merely chuckled at his resistance. Leave me alone, he muttered. Don't be like that, the man said. I'll take you where you belong, I'll take you to paradise, to Shamhala, the man said. Leave me alone, he shouted as he felt a burst of energy within him released once again and he blacked out again. Thales jumped away from the boy as soon as he started to morph again. Bathed in the familiar purple energy and eyes glowing a dangerous red as his features started to morph into that deer again. Arms started to stretch out in an unnatural length, fur started to cover him and his head, horns resembling those of a stag started growing out on his skull and his skin and his hair sheds as his skull started to morph into a deer, and the boy seems to grow into the size of a large tree as the skin on his chest started melting, revealing his ribs and his beating heart. A purple glow can be seen inside his heart, the place where they planted Epimenides' core. The boy turned into a monster, turned its glowing red eyes towards him and bare its elongated fangs at him before it let out a roar, a symphony of that of a beast, the devil, and a sorrowful being. Thales crinkled his nose as the stench of death and corruption hit his senses. How, he muttered as he covered his mouth with an handkerchief. How truly disgusting, Thales muttered as the monster charged at him, its pointed and sharp antlers first, in an attempt to pierce his heart and kill him with it, but it only managed to hit air as he teleported behind him. But as expected of a descendant of the beast, he said as he cast a miasma and threw it towards the monster. The monstrous deer just destroyed the miasma ball by hitting it with its antler before it stood on its hind legs once more before it swung its deformed arms, hitting him and throwing him a couple of meters away from the monster before it let out a screech that would have rendered anyone near it deaf. Thales landed into one of the burning houses with a loud thud. "Damn, Thales!" muttered as he emerged from the burning house before he managed to see the monster in front of him, mouth open and in the middle of casting a miasma spell. The giant deer fired the giant miasma ball towards him as soon as it finished, surprising him. The miasma ball came barreling towards him in the speed of light, hitting him and pushing him out of the village. The last thing Thales heard before he blacked out after he hit a tree hard was the loud howl within the burning village. He sat down in front of the headless corpse and muttered a silent prayer for her before he heard footsteps behind him. "I'll leave," he said as he opened his eyes and turned to face the right-hand man of the chief. A more reasonable man than that vile excuse of a man who is now nothing but a bloody pulp on the ground. "Just let me collect my things or what is remaining of it from my home and let me bury the healer first," he said as he stood up. "I thank you for your cooperation," the right-hand man said. "I'll put her outside the gates," he said as he sighed in exhaustion. "Thank you, sir," he said. "Just go," the right-hand man said. "I do owe your mother," he said. "The least I can do is honor my debt by letting you go, but you have to promise to never return here," the right-hand man said. "Ever," he said. He shrugged his shoulders. "As if I'll want to return here," he said before he stood up. "And as though we will welcome you inside this village again," the right-hand man said. "Not after what you did," he said. He just shot the older man a glare as he looked behind him before he walked off and towards the remains of his old home to retrieve whatever he can salvage. "Thank you for everything," he muttered after he muttered a short prayer for the old healer. "I pray that you will find peace, madam," he said. "Don't worry, I'll be all right being on my own," he said before he stood up. "So, please find peace," he said before he started to collect the ornate pauldron and vambrace along with the rear brace and couture. It seems a little too big for him, but he is sure that it will fit him someday. "Well, I'm off," he said as he tied the orange scarf around his neck. "This one is a gift from that old man who taught him how to hold a lance properly. He never got to thank him though. Maybe someday he'll come across him and his son again and maybe he'll thank him," he hoped. Chapter 63, Memory of Her. He is standing in the middle of a burning village once more. Panic screams and the sickening scent of metal and smoke invaded his senses as he stood there, staring blankly at the chaos and the destruction going around the village, unknown mages and soldiers snatching the villagers before they got hauled off somewhere to be subjected to an unspeakable horror. Their fates was left to those who remains and he couldn't care less. He wanted them to burn, to suffer, and to die. A man suddenly appeared in front of him, skin as pale as the snow and eyes matching his complexion and just as lifeless as a fish's eyes. The man smirked maliciously as he made a move to grab him. "We finally found you," he said as his arm extended towards him. "Epimens," the man said as he felt his heart beating rapidly. No, leave me Lenny, leave me Lenny, leave me alone." Flashes of red, flashes of pain and suffering swirls around his mind before he heard a calm and soft-spoken voice speaking in tongues that was lost long ago that he can only translate as, "This is the truth of the world. Nothing but pain and death, a never-ending cycle of suffering and war, an eternal war have raged on for 3 millennia, on and on will the earth be bathed with blood and the flesh of those who have continued this secret and eternal war." Up, a man said. He groaned and turned on his side before he throws the blanket over his face. "I said wake up, you useless pile of sack," the man said again before he felt a heavy fist on his shoulder. "Leave me alone," he shouted as he abruptly sat up. "Finally," the man said as he put his hands on his waist. "Been trying to wake you up since let's have given up a few hours ago," he said. "Geez," he muttered as he buried his face on his hand. The man grinned at him. "What?" he asked. "I see that you have a rather fun night last night, you dog," the man said. "Shut it," he said as he swept his hair up, musing it even more. "So, the Man said, you got some last night and guessing from the handprint on your cheek, it didn't finished well, he noted, didn't satisfy her enough. The man asked. More like, he said with a groan, I'm only looking for a short time fling while we are here, but she is looking for something serious, he said, told her it is what it is and she slapped me while telling me a couple of insult, he said before he stretched his arms. Shame, the man said, she seems like a good woman, he said, loves you too much, the man said. Well, it is what it is, he said with a shrug of his shoulders, sides, she is better off finding someone with a more stable life than a mercenary, he said. You are a jerk, the man said. Get off my case, gets, he warned. Just saying, gets, said as he raised his arms in surrender. As long as you know, he said as he got out of bed, bare as the day he was born. Just get dress or captain will leave you behind, gets, said. Of course, he said as he pranced around the room as he collected his clothes. He slumped down the bed as he remembered the events from last night and how it ended with him breaking another woman's heart again. He laid with her for the umpteenth time that week. She told him that she wanted to be married and he told her that he is only looking for a temporary relief and a slap on his face. Same old, same old. Well, nothing to be done now, he said as he scratched his head and started putting back his clothes. You are a jerk, Berlin said as they walked through the forest. Not you too, Captain, he said as he scratched his head. You need a reminder, Berling said, since we are the ones who have to deal with every woman whom hearts were broken by you, she said, seriously, kid, Berling said, what is wrong with you? She asked. What do you mean by that, Captain? He asked. You always seems to be aloof despite being so much more sociable compared to the rest of us, Berling said, that and you seem to be avoiding anything that will lead to attachment, she said. He just shrugged his shoulders. Well, I'm a merc and a merc never stayed in one place, he said. But that doesn't mean that you are forbidden to call something your home, Berlin said. He didn't respond at that for a moment as he thought about Captain Berling's words. I just don't see any sense of having a place to call home when I know that I would never come to it, he said. But still, Berlin said. I just don't find anything appealing or even necessarily important of having a place to call home, he said, not when I know that I will only destroy that place, he added in his mind as his thoughts went back to that night 11 years ago. He still cannot forget that. It serves as a reminder to him that he will never belong somewhere, that he will never truly find a place to call his own, because he will only destroy it by his own hands. Berlin hummed thoughtfully before she shrugged her shoulders. At any rate, I want your head in the game, she said. Oh, he asked as his interest piqued. We are going to talk to some lower noble right around the boundary of Alliance territory and Imperial territory, Berling said. Already? Gets chimed in. You got a problem with that? Berlin asked. We just finished a job in Edmund and now, we are here going to another job. Gets asked before he whistled in amusement. You sure work fast, Captain, he said. We do need the coins, Berlin said happily. Right you are, Captain, Lazai said. That I'm, let's, Berlin said with proud puff of her chest. That I'm, she said. So, he said, how much is the pay? He asked. Nose to grindstone as usual, huh? Berlin said, they are offering a higher price than the usual, she said, and I'm a little hesitant about this job too, Berlin said at first. She added. And why is that? He asked. I heard that we are fighting against Geralt's mercenary company, Berlin said. Blade Breaker? He asked in shocked. Berling's mercenary is a strong mercenary company, that is a known fact, but their reputation is nowhere near that of Geralt's. It was known in his line of work that Geralt's mercs are the elite of all Fodlan and can wipe out a battalion of armies in one swoop. Are you sure that we can go toe-to-toe with them? He asked skeptically. Put a bit of a faith in us. Berlin said, it is high time that we finally go against the cream of crop for us mercenaries and become the best there is by beating Geralt and his band of mercenaries. Berlin said proudly. Whatever you say, Captain, he said worriedly. It will be fine, Shay gets said as he hit his back. We always comes out of any situation alive and this is no exception. He said cheerfully. I wish I have that optimism of yours sometimes, he said. Someone need to be all sunshine and stuff, gets said, especially since one of us is always a skeptic, he added as he shot a sideway glance his way. Hey, someone need to be careful about everything. He said. Tell that to every woman that have their hearts broken by you. Gets said. With that being said, he said slowly. What? He asked. How come you got some a lot and the rest of us get a dry spell? Gets exclaimed, and that accusation was met by several of their fellow mercs with a nod and hum of agreement. I don't know. He said, unsure of what to say. What do you mean you don't know? Gets asked. I just don't know, he said with a shrug of his shoulders. I say sweet words or two, compliment them, make them laugh, and boom. Before I know it, we are in bed doing stuff, he said. Damn bastard, Gets muttered. It was good and all until you remember how many times have I been slapped by women, he said. You deserved it, asshole, Liege said with a huff. Get off my case, let's, he said as he rubs his cheek, the one where his latest conquest have slapped him. Messing around with as many girls as can be is the most fun any guy would have while they are young, he stated. I can't wait to see the day when a woman managed to grab you by the balls and never let you go, Gets said. Or better yet, one who will force him to commit to a life of celibacy, Liege said. That too, Gets said. As if someone would, he said. You'll see, Liege said. And when that time comes, Berlin said, I'll make sure to throw a huge feast for celebrating of someone finally grabbing you by the balls and never letting go. Berlin said happily. The rest of them voiced their own agreement on the matter. Can we all just drop it already? He asked. His only response was a bunch of chuckles from his comrades. This made him sigh softly before a small smile managed to come out. They are a rowdy bunch and they are annoying at best, but they are still family, and he finds that he rather loves the idea and can only hope that his sentiments was shared by them, but deep down he knows they are only together because of the coins and not tied by any of their bonds, but he can delude himself. After all, he is a man with no land to call his home, he is a vagabond, and someday, he might have to leave Berlin and her band of mercenaries as to not bring any misfortune down to them. He wanted to stay with them for a while longer and pretend that they are one big family. Or so he thought. The moment their mission started, all hell broke loose. He dashed through the fields as he saw the bloodied and lifeless remains of his former comrades. The night is unusually cold and a little misty on the side. He can feel an ominous sense foreboding as he got closer and closer towards the fortress, and as soon as he got inside the fortress, he saw Gets laying on the ground bloodied and on the verge of death alongside Captain Berling and Liege, who is laying down on the ground covered in their own blood. Run, Gets said weakly, while you still can, he said as he reached out one bloodied hand towards him before he gone limp as life left him. Gets, he muttered as he felt his hand shake. No. He muttered before he saw a shadow moved ever so slowly through the mist. A woman around his age or even younger, clad in grey and black clothing, emerged from the fog, wielding a silver sword drenched and stained in the blood of his comrades, indigo eyes lifeless as it looked at him as her dark teal hair flutter in the wind, and he instantly knows who this woman is. The Ashen Demon. The scourge of death on earth, or more likely the incarnation of death. Whoever have the pleasure of meeting her in the battlefield, will surely meet their maker. Stand down or die, the Ashen Demon said, as though she is giving him a chance to turn tail and run from her. but no. He will not run, he have to try and avenge the captain and his comrade that fell to her blade. He charge at the ashen demon, sword ready at the ready. He swung his blade only for the woman to dodge him swiftly and gracefully before she throw a jab at him, hitting him on the arm before he retaliate by throwing a jab of his own only for the ashen demon to side dodge his blade before she trapped him in the flurry of swings, hitting him on his chest, stomach, and arms as he tried to block the attacks before the ashen demon punch him on his stomach, throwing him a good meter away from her. It's only one merc, he thought as he painstakingly stood on his feet. Why am I so scared? He thought as he met the cold and empty eyes of the demon. He needed to calm down and focus. The ashen demon narrowed her eyes ever so slight before she swung at him, making him duck as the blade whizzed past his hair before he parried her blade from below and blocking the ones that swung from above before he saw his window of opportunity, and he swung his blade in a frantic and desperate attempt to at least nick her or wound her, but to no avail. The ashen demon parried and blocked every swing of his blade before she punched him on the face, throwing him off the loop for a moment before he charged towards her only for her to stomp at his foot, making him stagger. He tried to regain his footing as quickly as he can, but the demon is faster and all he can do is make a feeble and pathetic attempt to block her, but the ashen demon managed to find an opening and stab him on his abdomen before she managed to throw him a few meters away from her. He landed face first on the ground as his sword landed a few meters in front of him. He can feel himself bleeding profusely and the ground grows colder and colder as he grows weaker and weaker as the ashen demon stalked towards him, slowly as though to mock him of his failure to avenge his fallen comrade. The ashen demon raised her blade in preparation to end him then and there. End, with you. What? The cycle of this world, I won't allow it to end with you. And suddenly a surge of power washed over him as he got on his feet while he grabs his sword and reached out his hand as a mysterious blade materialized on his left hand. The ashen demon looks petrified for a while before she got on her guard before he charged at her. The ashen demon blocked his attack, making her stagger a bit on her feet before another he followed up with his other sword. He managed to nick her a little as she jumped away from him before he swung his blade, releasing a purple energy towards her. The demon rolled away from the attack before her. She fired a fire spell at him in which he dispersed by hitting it with his blade and releasing another purple energy towards her, making her roll out of the way again. You are fighting like a different person, the ashen demon noted. He is about to say something when we are here to help. A mercenary said as a horde of them flooded the fortress, surrounding him. The ashen demon nods before she retreated to the background. He made quick work of the mercenaries before the ashen demon appeared again. As their fight draws longer and he thought that it would never end. We are done here. A man, the blade breaker said. The ashen demon kicked him away from her, making him land on his butt. Sorry, but this fight is over, the ashen demon said as she turned her back on him. He quickly got onto his feet. Hey, wait. He growled angrily. Why? The ashen demon asked as she turned her head a little to acknowledge him. We've achieved our goal and your job is to stop us and you failed, she stated. He growled in anger and frustration since what she is saying is true. Another time perhaps, the ashen demon said before she walked away. Wait. He growled again before his legs gave out underneath him. Why am I so tired? He muttered before he slumped down and darkness finally consumes him. And that's how he meet Arvel and the start of their friendship as they traveled all over Fodlan in search of the ashen demon, that is until the war broke out and news that she might have perished spread across the continent and he lose all purpose in life and ended up wandering across the continent and beyond, until that fateful evening in Great Tree Moon where he meet her for the first time. The Archbishop, Byleth Eisner. And so, my father's right-hand man did exactly what father commanded him to, but then, Byleth said before hearing Shay snoring softly beside her, did I bore you with my stories? She muttered softly as she weaved her fingers through his hair. He must have been tired, Suthies said from place on her nightstand. Byleth hummed thoughtfully as she watched the purple-haired man sleep peacefully. Yet he still find time for me, she muttered softly as she watched him sleep. He looks peaceful and relaxed and she finds that she rather love the idea that he is only able to relax when he is by her side, and she also love looking at him like this, his expression not clouded with worry and exhaustion but at peace. That he did, Suthies said with a soft giggle. But what am I going to tell Alois and Seath tomorrow when they find us in bed together again? Byleth asked with a smile on her face as she continued to trace Shay's face, from his cheek to his strong jawline and finally his lips, considering that he will have to depart for his trip for Dada with Shamir tomorrow morning, she muttered as she was reminded again that she will have to wake up without him by her side once more. This is for the sake of establishing contact with any foreign land and to make things easier for Dimitri, Suthies said. A few weeks will have to do for you, she said. But, Byleth said, those few weeks feels like decades for me, she muttered as she lay down and put her head on his chest, listening to the steady beating of his heart while she wrapped herself around him. Contented with the world once more as she got to hold him again. I know, child, Suthies said. I know, she said. She kept quiet and listened to his soft snores, lulling her to sleep as one thought resounded in her mind and she suddenly felt guilty and fearful all at the same time. Would he still want to be by your side if he knew about you? Chapter 64, Homecoming. Green eyes surveyed the town below as the wind softly weaves through his green hair before his eyes glowed golden and he can finally see the actual damage that was done in Okama Mountains. It's worse than I thought, he muttered to himself as he observed the flow of energy and the craters on the grounds where the energy is flowing from. It seems like he have his work cut out for him. Again. Alois said as he went back to his relaxed position. Your form is too sloppy, lad. He said. Shay nods as he resets his own form and readied himself once more and adjusted his training gauntlet a little. Ready, Captain. He said. Alois charged towards him and he managed to parry the blow before he threw a left hook on Alois' side. Alois managed to block the attack. He saw Alois raising his leg, indicating to him that Alois is going to kick him. He let out a roar as he pushed hard enough for Alois to break his form and stagger a little, making it easier to throw Alois off him. Alois managed to steady himself after Shay pushed him back with all of his might when he managed to see the purple-haired man dashing towards him. His training gauntlet back and ready to strike him as soon as he close enough to him. He managed to jump back as soon as Shay took a swing at him. Alois relaxes his stance. Not bad, laddie. Alois said happily. That sure took me aback. He said with a laugh. All right, Shay said with a small and endearing smile on his lips. Thank you, Captain, he said. Again. Alois said as he went back to his stance. Come at me with everything you got. He said. Shay nods at him before he took a deep breath and went back to his stance again. Ready. When you are, Captain. He said. She leaned on one of the pillars as she watched two of the most precious men in her life trade blows with one another. However, her eyes are glued to her purple-haired knight, admiring and loving the way his body moved with every attack and parries he performed and how good he looked glistening like that under the light of the setting sun. She smiled to herself as she imagined him glistening like that under other circumstances. Keep your thoughts to yourself, Byleth. Suthies said with a huff. She just giggled at Suthies. Sorry, she said, not sounding a bit sorry. Now that she have acknowledged and accepted the fact that she is indeed in love with him, it is easier to be honest with herself in regards of what she wanted from him. Sound more sincere, Suthies demanded as the pendant bounced in annoyance. Hey, it's only natural to feel a certain way towards the man I love, she said, especially when he is doing hard labors and training, she said as she saw Shay ducking from a swing from Alois before he delivered an uppercut towards Alois, hitting on his chin making the older man stagger a little. Not bad, laddie. Alois said as he relaxes his stance. Certainly an improvement from last time, but you still lack the proper amount of force, he noted. Shay said before he took a deep breath. I will try harder next time, he said. No need to, laddie. Alois said. Your blows are lighter when you are trying to tire your enemy and you have a great footwork at that, he said. Your blows when you are ready to take down your enemies are pretty strong though, Alois said. Why did you wait to deal that blow when you have wear me down with stronger blows, laddie? He asked. Oh, Shay said as he wiped the sweat off his forehead. The Archbishop taught me, he said as he swept his hair back, revealing his whole face to her. And Eloise, she said that it's better to conserve my strength than to rush things, Shay said. She isn't the best professor for nothing, Eloise said cheerfully. That she is, Shay said with a proud smile on his face, making her heart flutter at the sight and the thought of him being proud of her. She giggled softly before she stood upright before she made herself to the two knights. You seem to be enjoying his company for quite some time now, Eloise, she said as she strutted towards them. Your Grace, Eloise greeted her happily. My apologies, he said with a chuckle before he bowed. I just missed the young lad here since he have been going around Fodlan and beyond these days, Eloise said as he looked at Shay. It's hard on this old man to get by without hearing his voice sometimes, he said. Same here, Eloise, she said wistfully. Same here, she muttered before she walked towards Shay. And that is why I'm here to demand that you give him back to me, she said as she clung to his arm. After all, he is obligated to be around me more than anything, she said. Why, Your Grace, Shay said as he tried to wiggle out of her grasp. What? She asked as she tightened her arms around his and leaned on his shoulder. Did you find this unpleasant even though I usually do this? She asked, hoping that he will say that no, he doesn't mind her doing this to him. Shay merely chuckled and leaned his forehead on the crown of her head. I don't mind, Your Grace, he said with a soft laugh, a sound that is both endearing and adored by her. But I figured that you would, he said. She looked up to Shay with a raised eyebrow. Why do you think that? She asked as she looked him in the eyes, admiring the soft and gentle look in them. But she internally winced at the discolored hue of his left eye, a reminder of his painful childhood. The village's chief beat him to the point that he went semi-blind on his left eye, making the vibrant color lighten to a lighter shade of purple. The sight made her reach out to touch the skin under the affected eye and caress the skin under the eye as gentle and as loving as she can. Shay holds the hand caressing the skin under his left eye before he kissed it. I'm drenched in sweat, he said as he put her hand on his chest. She giggled to herself before leaning on his chest, listening to the steady beating of his heart. I don't mind, she said softly as the world disappeared around her and Shay is the only thing that existed around her. Eloise merely chuckled to himself as he left the two alone. The knights and church truly have been monopolizing Shay lately, and he understands that Byleth have been missing the boy terribly at that, and Byleth deserved to have Shay to herself. Well, enjoy him for the rest of the day, Your Grace, Eloise said with a shake of his head as he left the two to their own world. Shay asked just as she wrapped her arms around his waist. As usual, she said before she planted a quick peck on his chest, the skin over his heart as quickly and as softly as she could as to not make him pick up on her feelings. Not because she have admitted that she is in love with him doesn't mean she is brave enough to confess. Okay, maybe that time is a sudden surge of courage and she is disappointed that he didn't hear her confession, but looking back at it, she is quite thankful that Shay didn't hear her confession because she is afraid. Afraid of losing him just because she can no longer bear the suffocating and maddening feeling of longing and desperation for his love. Afraid of knowing that her feelings isn't reciprocated even if she knew that it will never be reciprocated since she knows that Shay is in love with someone else. I bought your favorite tea, Shay said, bringing her out of her reverie. Really? She asked. Wait, isn't that a bit too expensive? She asked. Well, Shay said as he scratched his cheek. Kinda, he said, but I saved up quite a lot and I can buy you at least 5 of them, Shay said, scratching his head. You don't have to, she said as she pressed herself closer to him, not heeding the fact that he is sweaty. She don't mind it, not if it's him. I don't mind, Shay said as he pressed his forehead on the crown of her head once more before he sighed in contentment. I love bringing you gifts, he stated softly. You don't have to, she said, besides, you always brought me flowers, pastries, and all sort of stuff whenever you are out and about, she said. Shay hummed playfully as a response. Ah, but I love giving you stuff, he said. And why is that? She asked. Because you would always smile whenever I give you something, she said. No matter how small or insignificant the things I bring back to you, he said. It always made you smile, and that's the part I love the most, she said. Your smile and the way you appreciate something from this lowly night of yours, he said. How can a man resist? She asked. Not when I get to see such an enchantingly beautiful smile from an equally enchantingly beautiful woman, he said. She just laughed softly at that. Lowly and insignificant? Never. His gifts were never lowly and insignificant. They are her most prized possessions, and of course, Shay himself is the most precious of all the treasures she have. He is not insignificant, nor is he lowly. To her eyes, he is actually dazzling and radiant, an entity so unreachable and so impossible to possess. I guess you can't, she said. And he would be even more unreachable to you if he were to know that you are the one who wiped out his mercenary group 7 years ago. She tightened her hold on him once more before her eyes managed to see Sophia Durstein standing in the shadow, brown hair fluttering in the wind and her eyes determined as she looked at her beloved purple-haired knight. Maybe he'll run to her arms and leave you. Only a fool would stay with someone who killed his friends. I know that. I know, but, she thought as she tightened her hold on him even more, but I won't back down, I won't lose him to anyone or anything. She thought as an unbidden image of Sophia Durstein and Shay together came to her mind. I won't lose to her, I won't lose to her. She thought as her arms tightened even more around him as she felt the familiar insecurities rise inside her being again, the insecurities that kept her awake at night, a feeling she started having whenever she saw Sophia Durstein and Shay together, or whenever Sophia Durstein looked at Shay with so much affection and love that she is growing more and more afraid and paranoid as days goes by. Shay is slow when it comes to the matter of the hearts, but even he is bound to notice the looks of love and adoration Sophia Durstein shot at him, and even more so at the thought of another holding his heart in their hand. Even if he have someone he loves. Even then, she thought as she took in his scent, and she can feel herself relaxing as the scent of pine and forest hit her senses. His smiles and those looks of adoration and affection he shot her way, she loathed to think that someday it will belong to someone that wasn't her. I'll clean up and I'll meet you in your room, Shay asked. Why don't you take a bath in mine? She asked. As much as I would like to take my bath in private, I'm afraid I would have to decline, Your Grace, Shay said. She lifted her face from his chest and met the eyes she loves so much. Oh, she asked. It's inappropriate, Shay said. Not when I say so, she said as she leaned on his chest again, listening to the steady beat of his heart. A music she loves listening to over and over again, trap in an endless loop until the end of his days, the music she would never tire of listening to until the end of her days. Do you think that privilege belongs to you? No. Of course not, but she would love to have that privilege for herself. The privilege of being loved by him, the privilege of spending her life with him. Well, everyone have everything to say about that, Shay said. That's too bad, she muttered as she let out a soft sigh as the world falls into place once more and everything seems calm and peaceful. Shay, she called out to him. Yes, Your Grace, Shay asked as she holds his face in between her hands. Welcome home, she said as she caressed his cheeks. Shay's eyes softened before he closed them while he leaned his forehead on hers before his arms pulled her into a gentle and warm embrace, pressing her closer to his heart before she felt every muscles and limbs relaxed and a soft sigh escaped his lips as he buried his face on the crown of her head. I'm home, he muttered softly, and dare she hope, lovingly Byleth, Shay said. And she felt warm all over again upon hearing her name escape from his lips in that same loving and soft tone, loving how he held her in his arms, loving the way his shoulders compressed as he wrapped her in his embrace as though he is keeping her safe from every pain this world have to offer. And at that moment, she finally understood the meaning behind the words of her father's right-hand man as she buried her face deeper into his chest while she felt every inch of her relax as the familiar warmth and scent surrounds her. Remember, he said, a home is not an empty room nor a cozy palace, he said, a home is the place you feel safe, a place where you feel free, a home is where your heart feels safe and warm, he said. It could be anything, he said. And at that moment, she realized that her home is not the stone walls of Gareg Mach nor was it the vast continent of Fodlan. Home is the imperfect hunk of flesh covered in armor that smelled like pine and forest that always greeted her with a smile after a long day of work. Her home are these arms that wrapped her in their warm embrace. Her home is this man who holds her heart in his hands and cared for it as tenderly and as gently as he can. It is cliché, but there is no eloquent words she can describe Shay but the word home. Maybe, she can pretend just for a while longer, pretend that he saw her as his home as well, someone he will come back to no matter what happened, pretend that she is the hearth that keeps him safe and warm at the end of the day. Maybe she can pretend that she is who he have given his heart to just as she handed hers to him, even if it's just for today. Maybe she will pretend that Shay reciprocated her feelings. Well, I'll meet you in a jiffy, Shay said as he let her out of the trappings of his warm embrace. See you, Your Grace, he said happily before he went off to the direction of the bath and the sauna, oblivious to the feelings he have awoken inside her. What if he hated me? What if he leave me when I told him that I'm the one who wiped out his mercenary group? She thought as fear and uncertainty started to shroud her heart. And she don't know which is worse. Watch him love another as she wished for him to reciprocate her feeling while she wallow in despair, or watch the affectionate look in his eyes turn into hate? Chapter 65, The Oncoming Chaos. He sighed in relief as he sunk into the warm water. Something about taking a warm bath after the day is done seems so appealing to him, and he always feels refreshed whenever he take one after a long day of training and working, and given that he just arrived from his trip from Dada yesterday, his weeks have been hectic in between of trying to negotiate with the leaders of Dada and trying to spread the words of the church overseas, and Byleth isn't there to greet him, and he and Shamir reported to Sethan Liu of Byleth's absence. Byleth is at Fairgus helping the king and Margrave Gautier with Sreng and just got back today. I see that you are already back, Edwin said as he stopped behind him. He looked behind him to meet Edwin's eyes and he promptly remembered. Edwin is in love with Sophia, who might or might not have feelings for him. Edwin sighed at his silence. Don't make it weird, my dude, he said. Sorry, he said as he turned away from Edwin. It's just that, he said. I don't know what to say, he said. And it's only understandable, Edwin said. It wasn't your problem but mine, and I didn't even know if I do have feelings towards Miss Sophia, he said. So, mind your own problem in regards of her grace and Miss Sophia, Edwin said. He said after a while. I don't know what you are talking about, he said. You are still playing dumb? Edwin asked. So, he said, I see that you didn't turn into an icicle, he said with a smile. Don't you change the topic, Edwin said. You wanna know what I think? He asked with a serious tone. I love you, bro, he said as he hugged Edwin. Stop that, Edwin said. You are creeping me out, he exclaimed. He separated from Edwin. That's disappointing, he said with a mock disappointed tone. You are a creep, my dude, Edwin said with a shake of his head. Now, you are just hurting my feelings, darling, he said as he leaned back before he spread his arms on the edge of the tub and leaned his head down. He stared at the ceiling as Edwin's voice turned into a white noise in the background. The monastery is buzzing with energy as soon as ethereal moon comes around, and she can see why. The White Heron Cup and the annual ball is just around the corner, and the promise of romance or a tryst are in everyone's minds, and she can't help but smile to herself before an unbidden image of her and Shay, dancing under the light of the moon as they waltz to a music that only they can hear. The thought made her stop in her track before she looked up at the sky as she realized that her dreams and her fantasies will only stay a fantasy and an unattainable dream. Miss Sophia, Shay called out to her. She turned around to meet the eyes she loves much, and she felt her heart flutter at the sight of the man she have loved for so long. Sir Shay, she greeted back. Did your excursion with the students went well? She asked. That's right, Shay said, and we managed to finish it a day early than initially planned, he said happily as he adjusted the supplies he is carrying in his arms. Do you need help carrying all that stuff, Sir Shay? She asked. I can take some off your hand, she said as she moved to take some of the stuff Shay is carrying. Ah, Shay said as adjusted his body a little to prevent her from grabbing something from the pile in his arms. No need to exert yourself to such a task, Miss Sophia, he said. I can handle this, he said as he shot a smile towards her. But, she said as she looked at the stuff in his arms. Don't fret, Shay said with a wide grin. After all, I'm a big strong man, he said as he playfully tried to flex his arm for her. Sure you are, she said as a small and amused laugh escaped her lips. You don't believe me, Miss Sophia? Shay asked with a raise of his eyebrow. Of course not, she said playfully. Ah, Shay said. Now, that is a very big blow to my pride, he said with a sigh. I guess I'll just have to prove just how strong I'm to you, Shay said. Oh, she asked in amusement. And how exactly are you going to do that? She asked. Just the way I know how, Shay said, by showing you just how tough I'm in a fight, he said. You don't have to that, she said. But I do, Shay said. Since Miss Sophia is doubting my strength, he said, gotta regain the points I lost in my pride. Yeah, no, Shay said. Sure you do, she said with a giggle. Now, what is milady finding amusement in my plight? Shay asked. Nothing, she said. I highly doubt that it's nothing, Shay said as they entered in the reception hall. Well, she said, I was just thinking that you don't have to prove you are strong, at least not to me that is, she said. Shay said as he shuffled on his feet. And why is that? He asked. Because to me, you are the strongest man I know, she said softly. Shay just chuckled softly. Thank you, Miss Sophia, he said with a soft smile on his face. I really appreciate that, Shay said. Her heart fluttered upon the sight of his bashful smile and the way his eyes shine at the joy of her simple compliment. No need for thanks, Sir Shay, she said as she scooted closer to the purple-haired knight. I only told you what I thought of you, and that is that, she said, and the smile he gave her made her heart skip a beat, making her smile softly as a response to his smile. Oh, how she loved looking at his smile, the ones that reaches his eyes, that is, since she knows that it truly is a smile that come from his heart, one of the telltale signs that he is genuinely happy and flattered by something. Upon thinking of that, just as her heart soared at the sight of his smile, her heart plummeted to the solace of her feet upon realizing that those type of smiles only appeared whenever. Well, I better get going now, Shay said as he went towards the stairs leading to the audience chamber. Her Grace is waiting for me, he said as the light in his eyes grows brighter as the smile on his face grows softer and happier upon the mention and the thought of the Archbishop. Her smile fell at the sight of the even softer and brighter smile on his face. Yes, she said as she tried to give him a smile. See you later, Sir Shay, she said. Shay nodded before he ascended the stone stairs. The eager sound of his footsteps gradually disappeared, leaving her with a heavy feeling in her heart, as well as that murky feeling that seems to blossom even stronger every time she saw the Archbishop and Shay together, and the way Shay treated the Archbishop as though she is his whole world, his whole heart. What woman wouldn't want to be treated the way Shay treated the Archbishop, with such care and tenderness? Even if one would argue to her that Shay is only doing so because the Archbishop is his boss, no one would be able to deny that Shay is not doing it out of obligation and duty towards the Archbishop, but out of love towards the most powerful and influential woman in all of Fodlan. She shakes her head to get rid of the thought inside her head as she entered the cathedral. No more of these thoughts. She decided to gain his heart. She decided not to run anymore and face everything head-on, and she is not going to lose to someone who is too much of a coward to even admit her feelings. She will not lose. She don't care if she is going to take Shay away from the Archbishop, she will not lose. With that she is nod to herself in determination. On the night of the ball, she will tell him how she feel about him. A woman opened the wooden door leading to a room full of some of the most eccentric equipments and inventions the world have the pleasure of knowing, and standing at the edge of the room, monitoring a metallic contraption, is a tall and brown-haired man dressed in an elegant and sharp suit, stood straight as a statue with his broad shoulders squared proudly as he watched his experiment as closely as he can. I see that you are hard at work. The Woman said, purple eyes gleaming in amusement. But do be careful, Professor, she said. The man who is called Professor chuckled in amusement on that remark. I see that you still cannot comprehend that there is none such a thing as being careful when it comes to science, my blind-eyed beauty, the professor said as his bright green eyes sparkled in amusement. A Protothedes, he said. A Protothedes merely chuckled. Well, it is worth a try trying to convince you not to go overboard with your crazy experiments, she said with a shrug of her shoulders. Not that I care about the process of your work, A Protothedes said as a wicked grin slowly formed on her face. I just care only about the results, she said. And you shall have it, the professor said. No need to worry about the end results, my impatient beauty, he said. We will receive only the most sublime and optimal results, the professor said. That assured me, A Protothedes said. Well, I shall leave you to your works now, Celsus, she said. Of course. Celsus said before he saw one of his contraptions light up. What an unexpected result, he muttered in amusement as he saw his machine light. Wonderful. Excellent. Celsus said as he started writing in his journal. Exquisite. He announced to the large room. Well, have fun now, A Protothedes said as she walks away and leave the professor to himself as he rambles on and on about how amazing the result of his experiment is. Somewhere in Xanadu, Rhea felt something in her shift as the cold air in Xanadu blew. This feeling of foreboding, no, she must be imagining, since this is the feeling she hasn't felt since the Xanadu massacre or that day 3 millennia ago, the day Epimens declared war on Nabatea. Is something the matter, Lady Rhea? Catherine asked as she put Thunderbrand on the side before sitting down across her mistress. No, it's just that, Rhea said. I just felt some sort of a disturbance, as though something is going to happen soon, she said. Usually, Catherine would be taking her usual stance of being on her guard whenever Lady Rhea says something ominous, but this time she decided to shrug it off as nothing, since Lady Rhea is already retired and she is determined to let her lady spend the rest of her days in peace. Plus the new archbishop can take care of things from here on out too. You are probably imagining things, Lady Rhea, Catherine said. I hope I'm, Catherine, Rhea said. I hope I'm, she said as though to assure herself that no one and nothing will disturb the peace Fodlan have awaited for millennia. But despite that, she still felt that disturbing feeling, and nothing seems to be making that feeling disappear. Come at me. No hesitations, Byleth said as she went into her usual stance. He nodded as he charges towards her, blade at the ready. Byleth managed to block his training sword with ease. No, she said as she pushed him back, signaling him to stop. What's the problem? He asked as he relaxes his stance. You are too hasty in your assault, Byleth said. That is too dangerous. Take time to evaluate the enemy and to gauge their reactions to your every movement, she said. Right, he said before he went back to his stance again. He demanded. All right, Byleth said as she went back to his stance. I see that you two are having a rather steamy night, someone said from above them. Mind if I cut in? She asked as she landed in one of the tree branches. Ms. Regnus, Byleth greeted courtly. Is this about the movement that Suthies felt with an Alquam? She asked. Oh, Valerie said. So, you already know that Repharemer is making their move after 3 millennia of slithering around in the dark and in secret, Lady Suthies, she said. Yes, Suthies said, and it is sending a wave of foreboding to every remaining Nabateans all across the world, and there have been attacks after attacks of unknown origins in both Bridget and Almira, she said. I see that Repharemer is starting to make a show of themselves, Valerie said. Well, considering that the news of Epimens' whereabouts is spreading across their own fold, it's not hard to imagine that the bringer of unconventional schemes is commanding them to collect the necessary resources for the preparation of the extraction of Epimens, Valerie said. Arvel groaned. One headache after another, it seems, he said. So, what is your next course of action, midget? Valerie asked. We are still deciding, Byleth said. We still need to consider the safety of everyone in Fodlan, she said, that and the fact that I have to abdicate my position as Archbishop when the time comes when we have to leave this place, Byleth said. Leave? He asked in shock. As you can see, Twerp, Suthies said in a grave tone, as you are Epiman's vessel, Refermer is bound to come for you and wreak havoc in Gareg Mach. She said. Then, he said I see, he muttered as he felt a wave of disappointment crash over him. It seems like he is really bound to a life of being a vagabond, being a man who have no land to call his home. Wait, he said as he looked at Byleth, realizing just now what her statement from earlier meant. You said that you will abdicate your position as an archbishop when the time comes that you have to leave, he said. Byleth merely raised an eyebrow at him as though he just said something so utterly incomprehensible to her. Yeah, she said, in order to keep everyone safe and away from all the fighting, we will have to depart this place someday and maybe find somewhere safe to hide for a few years, Byleth said, tilting her head in confusion. Then, he said. Of course, I'll go with you, Byleth said softly. Why would you think that I will willingly leave your side? She asked. Just for me, he said as he swallowed a sudden lump that is forming in his throat at the thought of dragging Byleth into the dirt with him. You are willing to leave the life of luxury and comfort just to go with a man with nothing but himself to offer you? He asked. And what is so bad about that? Byleth asked. But, he said, trying to protest about Byleth's decision to throw everything she have away just to keep him safe from Refermer and ashamed that the person he is supposed to be protecting is the one guarding him. It's a much better alternative than letting you go wander alone, Suthies said. And what is a more effective way to fend off the enemy than a traveling companion, is what you are saying, girlie? Arvel asked skeptically. That's what I'm saying, Byleth said. Leaving this town, leaving just as he is just settling, nothing is more heart-wrenching than that. That is why he doesn't want to be attached to something or someone, because saying goodbye will be harder. To all the people he made a bond with, to the place that is starting to be home. Don't worry, Byleth said, we are not leaving immediately since we have to make the necessary preparations and all, she said. He nods at her. Right, he muttered in relief. Well, with that being said, Valerie said, good night and enjoy yourselves, she said before she jumped into the air before she transformed into her other form. They will have to leave someday. Check the description for the links to the author.